And raising awareness. Our bite-sized sessions are aimed at professionals and we cover a whole host of topics. We've had over 2,500 engagements with those so far, 1,700 plus in person or online virtually, and then the remaining people have watched it on YouTube because we have links to our own YouTube channel. We've got a drugs and alcohol session coming up for professionals on the 22nd of January, and we've got a coercive control and abuse session coming up on the 28th of January. The final piece of work I'd like to draw your attention to is our Let's Talk programme. Let's Talk is about raising awareness again, but this time for parents and carers. Many parents of teenagers have found they don't know what's happening, they don't know what the risks are, but they want to know, and they want to know the signs to look out for, they want to know what they can do. We've had over 9,000 engagements with the Let's Talk programme so far. This year has mainly been about launching our own website for Let's Talk, so parents have a central point that is reliable and trusted where they can go and get information. That we are hoping to launch at the end of March. We're having a meeting with the Office of the Police Crime Commissioner next week where we are talking about the future of Let's Talk, because as a CSP we do not have a budget, so to do this work we obviously need to go out and apply for grants and so on, and that's what we're doing. We would like to rerun the Let's Talk Teenagers, the pre-teens and the primary sessions, as well as having themed sessions specifically around things like pornography or online challenges and the like. But that's something that we've got to get money in to do, and that's what we're planning on doing next week. The final thing that I just wanted to mention is we do hold an annual forum every year that invites all the partners that we're working with to come and talk a little bit about the work they've done with us over the previous year. This year, that forum is going to be held online because we found we've got a better turnout online, more people are able to attend, and it's on the 11th of May this year. But for now, I'm going to be quiet, and if you've got any further questions for myself or my colleagues here, then please let me know.
Thank you, Claire. Right, any questions from the floor? Councillor Guthrie.
Thanks very much. I was just wondering, how do you normally get your funding? Because obviously for young people and teenagers, if that resource isn't in place, you'd have thought, that's priority for all of us. So I was just wondering where you're hopeful of getting it or where it normally comes from. Thank you.
Well, the Let's Talk programme's been funded from a number of different initiatives. So last year, Safer Devon were given a pot of money for Devon, and each area in Devon had to apply to get some of that money. We got some money for Let's Talk around that. We have had money from the Police Crime Commissioner. Becca Hewitt, who is the chair and manager of the Community Safety Partnership, has been doing it for 25 years. She's very good at going out and applying for grants and making sure that people are aware of what we're doing so that they make us aware of any grants that are available. So if you hear of any grants that are available, we're always keen to know.
Thanks very much.
Any further questions? Panel? Yes. Councillor Wakeham.
Thank you. Could you tell me how do you let people know about your Let's Talk sessions?
Okay, so Let's Talk, we initially started mailing out through our schools and asking them to mail out to our parents. Those that have attended have forwarded it on to other people and recommended other people. We now we invite people who do attend to sign up to our mailing list. Our mailing list is now approximately 900 people. A lot of it is word of mouth and other parents recommending people attend.
Councillor Kimber.
Just looking at Let's Talk. Hello. Just a couple of things. So are young people involved in the Let's Talk programme? And if they are, what are they saying? And I'm really interested in inclusion of young people in community life. And I just wonder if you've seen any good models for that we could learn from.
So in terms of Let's Talk, young people haven't been involved in the development of that. I know, not in West Devon, but I know in South that Teambridge were given some money to do a specific piece of work with young people, and we've used that information that they've got from those young people across our entire South Devon and Dartmoor Community Safety Partnership area. And it was things like young people, they had public toilets, for example, and girls were complaining because they were saying boys were putting their phones under the door because there was a gap at the bottom of the door. It was as simple as changing the doors. And then young people felt they were listened to, and then, you know, they would talk to those group of young people more. We also had this is funded by Devon, not by us, but there was a piece of work done about harmful sexual behaviour in schools, and that's working with young people. And then that information that we get from that comes out and feeds into our other projects like Let's Talk, about what they're hearing and seeing. But Let's Talk is specifically more parent-centred, about raising awareness for parents, because many parents are not aware of the community safety risks that are out there.
Can I just add something to that, if it's okay? So one of the things that in the police we're doing, which we haven't done previously, so following some of the national best practice, we've started a programme around introducing child-centred policing teams. So there's an obligation on us in criminal justice side to keep, it sounds obvious, but to keep children out of the criminal justice system. The significant impact on life chances, life expectancy are so dramatic once you enter. So there's a real onus, and of course that can sometimes run into conflict with communities who often, when you talk about antisocial behaviour, want children punished in a more formal way. What that means in practice is we've got a bid currently running through a couple of funding streams to look at how we can support educators in schools, deliver targeted inputs depending on age around exploitation, around domestic abuse, coercive control as you go to the upper ranges into secondary school. Because simply we can't be in every school. There are so many schools across both West Devon for here, but all, across Devon and Cornwall. And that feeds into the work of the Community Safety Partnership. So there is, whilst children might not be represented so much in Let's Talk, there is a through flow of what those sessions will then tell us into the Community Safety Partnership.
And I just add to that we work closely with the Child Centre Policing team. In fact, I've got a meeting with a new officer that's come in next week. So, yeah, we work really closely together, and there's youth intervention officers in our schools as well that we work closely with.
Councillor Daniel, then I'll come back to Councillor Kimber.
Thank you. I was interested to hear you say that that one person had caused so much damage in Tavistock and had used so much of the resources that you have to deal with. And I myself, we had a situation where I live that the one family was causing a huge amount of problems. Now they've moved away, we don't seem to have any of that. And just wondering what you do to try and work together with other agencies, because I know resources are scarce, to try and prevent this escalating with families that, or individuals that have got a lot of problems and a lot of difficulties and take it out on the rest of us. Thanks.
So a good question, thank you. I think it's about utilising the best tool within our toolkit sometimes. We have more tools than ever, so I don't know if you've seen my press release in the last week or two about antisocial behaviour and how over the last 12 months our antisocial behaviour in West Devon's reduced by 9%. Something we're really proud about, and that's why I wanted to open up with that statistic. And the tools that we have now are public spaces protection orders. So they were new last year in Oakhampton and Tavistock, so we can disperse people that are causing a disorder. And then we've got antisocial behaviour legislation like community protection warnings that can escalate quickly then up to community protection notices, which come with a power of arrest. And then that gives us some weight to go to a court and apply for things like criminal behaviour orders, which may then correlate with a custodial prison sentence. So it's about utilising the tools. And when we notice someone that is committing more offences than others, then we will call a strategy meeting with other partners to identify how we can resolve that together, and perhaps whether we try to resolve that as a single agency or as or in partnership. And we will always strive towards the latter. That will be our default position.
Thank you. We can sometimes get lost in statistics, so that is a really relevant one. You may have missed it in Claire's initial input. The success around community protection warnings and then notices as a sort of staged is incredible. So this community safety partnership, and I know we've got a West Devon focus on it now, has really driven Devon and Cornwall Police and driven our regional approach to this. Prevention is better than cure, isn't it? And actually getting upstream of that, the investment that we've done across agencies, but particularly I think the police and the local authority, in investing in protection warnings and notices and moving really, really quickly. So from a policing perspective, investing in some of our legal support to that, as well as what comes from the local authority, it's showing real benefits, particularly for antisocial behaviour.
Councillor Kimber.
Thank you very much. Can I talk about antisocial behaviour from the opposite point of view? Because I'm sure you've got experience with this. So I'm getting more complaints from people about what I would consider normal behaviour from children. So they complain about them riding their bicycles or making a noise. And I think children should be congratulated for doing those things. So how do you find the balance between people's complaints, which seem unreasonable to me? Because we want to support our children, is what I'm trying to say.
It's really difficult. I think it's about managing public expectation early on about what is reasonable and what is not, and that can be difficult when it's subjective. But when we have policy and procedures in place, then something more objectively has been applied. So I think it is about finding a balance and perhaps identifying what triggers that might exist outside of that child riding on their bicycle.
I'd also add to that when we're dealing with these problems in partnership, the unreasonable complainant is more likely to listen because it's coming from more than one place effectively. They're getting the same answer from the local authority as they're getting from the police. So, yeah, that helps a lot.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, you're probably aware of the situation in Bannerwell Street. Are you directly involved in it? I sent an email to Claire over the weekend asking for a further meeting. Is there anything on the wider issue that relates to that type of issue, or is it just something we'll deal with when we get to the next meeting with the social services from the county?
I am aware of the issue, and I did respond to Claire, which I'm hoping would have been forwarded on. So I think I'm keen to participate in the meeting. I've seen some proposed dates, but I don't want to lose sight of the opportunity that I hopefully provide councillors with our quarterly in-person meetings and our monthly drop-in sessions, because there would have been opportunity to discuss that prior to those comms being received.
If there are drop-in sessions that you're running, obviously any notification would be useful. Both myself and Councillor Greenbury-Pullen are board members, and I've taken the lead on that on behalf of the three of us ward members, because the other person concerned, of course, is Councillor Moody, who lives directly opposite, and he feels it a bit difficult, him being a close neighbour, to be directly involved. So I've been asked to lead on it, and I'm happy to try and push this process forward so we get a resolution, because there's clearly a number of issues just beyond straight policing and or social behaviour actions.
Yeah, sure. I look forward to discussing it further at the strategy meeting, but just to be clear that the incident that was referred to in the email at the beginning of the year related to someone not associated with that address, which we then arrested.
Can I just confirm, have you received the notification for the drop-in sessions, or are you not receiving those? Okay, I'll make sure you are both on the list.
Sorry, yeah.
Councillor Greenbury-Pullen.
Hi, I'm not Kevin, I'm Holly. Could be. So a couple of questions. First of all, do you have any, you mentioned statistics and they're not always helpful, but I think where agencies struggle to find a really productive working relationship, do you get much feedback or data on the younger element of the community who are perhaps neurodiverse, some elements who come from the care sector? That was one question, because we all know there's an absolute issue with getting the right emotional mental health support for younger people, and that often can be seen in complex community engagements. That was one question. The second question was, what, if any, do you feel the benefit would be for CCTV in key areas in the town, perhaps even on a recorded system, so it didn't have to be monitored, but it could be referred to, for example, the bus station, as and when incidents occur?
I'll do it first. Probably the matter you raised is probably one which overlaps between statutory processes and forums, without going into the minutiae of of different processes. That would sit within the Safer Children's Partnership. So I've chaired the Safer Children's Partnership for the whole of Devon for 2 years. I'm now the Vice Chair, having handed over to my colleague in the Health Service. So there is line of sight. Is it difficult and challenging? Yes, it is, because simply there is no singular voice that represents. So often education are the lead people who would bring that information in. So there are a number of forums, be that Young Voice, the Youth Parliament, that would feed into that and help us not only understand the voice of children, and certainly children with neurodiverse conditions, but also then the statistics. So we know that the issue in Devon with special educational needs and disabilities, there are some challenges in there. I can't represent the education system on behalf of the Devon County, but there are challenges we know about and are talked about really openly and in a professional way through those forums. That's probably mostly the area we talk about it rather than the Community Safety Partnership. Where that then translates into issues such as antisocial behaviour, yes, at a practitioner level, I'm comfortable that we talk about that regularly and we treat the needs of the individual, but are the sort of broader risks, could you put your hand on data which informs where that significant risk is in a area like Tavistock versus Totnes? That probably isn't held at that level, but it is treated on an individual basis. The broader system approach is discussed within the Safer Children's Partnership.
So just feeding back on that one response, do you find that a lot of your resources with the younger element are focused on areas of mental health support? So kids who are perhaps, suffering with mental health needs by whatever symptom they show, whether it be self-harm, drinking, drugs, anger, dysregulation, etc. Is that an area that you feel a lot of your resources are focused on? Despite, I know there's a clear message from the Police and Crime Commissioner not to focus in that area specifically, it's more of a mental health need. But I'm just wondering, in reality, what do you find as far as your lived experiences?
I think it is a useful point. In policing in general, and I've been policing long enough to remember, we speak about it. When I first joined policing, we didn't at all. And that's been a significant change, and I think you could apply that to society at a whole, whether we're talking about children or adults. There's some really interesting, if you want to access it through the College of Policing, the What Works Foundation, some interesting national statistics around the amount of police time that it's spent engaging with those who have substance misuse, mental health diagnoses, or neurodiverse conditions, and the latter is probably the emerging data set. Majority of our time, no, probably not, but it is a significant part. And we work in partnership, so whether that's a police responsibility to lead that, we've got Right Care, Right Person, which is about the right professional to lead on issues which are relating to missing people. They are engaging in emerging conversations as we go through it and develop our understanding. I wouldn't say it's most of our time, but it is a significant portion dealing with people who have neurodiverse conditions or mental health diagnoses. Deal with that?
Yeah, sure. And in response to your second question about CCTV, I think, please let me make myself very clear that I joined the police because I enjoy investigating crime. And I think that when you've got things like visually recorded evidence and CCTV, you're more likely to get a detection on that crime. And I do find it quite obscure, having come from a different policing area to this one, that there is no CCTV in Tavistock. Now, be assured that we've had meetings about this and where this funding may come from, including within policing and the BCC. There is a degree of that available to us all. But you've seen that the arsons across the winter period that has now resulted in us making an arrest. That's because that suspect was sloppy and we were able to do something positive with that information. But having CCTV in Tavistock, we would have been able to apprehend him from crime number 1. So we have a meeting planned, I think, in March. And yes, yeah. So I look forward to discussing it further then. But I'm a supporter of it for sure.
Councillor Vachon.
Thank you. Yeah, you just sparked a question there from the CCTV, because we do actually have that in Oakhampton. And it seems to work very well, but I'm just wondering if there are any statistics that say it's actually working and we're actually catching anybody from that, or whether it's just pushing people away. We've noticed that obviously a lot of the younger members of our community don't know it's there, or they don't think it's there, but they commit certain crimes anyway within that area, not knowing it's there. So there's obviously an educational aspect to them knowing that CCTV is there. But we're finding also it's tended to push the crime outside of that town area. And although we can move the cameras around, it's actually deciding where that actually goes. So is there any statistics to say that is actually working?
That's a good question, and I'd like to take that away, if I may, and then report back at the next West Ever Matters, because I would like to try and become creative about how we could obtain such data. You are right, people don't know it's there in Oakhampton, but it's an absolute blessing, because when we get reports of, let's just say, the lowest level antisocial behaviour, we're able to identify who's involved and then go and engage with those individuals at an early stage to prevent them from reoffending. But I will try and get some statistics.
Thank you. Just one other question, if I may, Chair.
Just on that, before you go on to a different question, okay. I wouldn't necessarily, my counsel to you, if you excuse the pun, wouldn't be to necessarily rely entirely on statistics. So where it is, if it's in the front of a shop, then it can act as a deterrent. There is some data nationally around how effective that is. If it's over your most stolen item, in terms of detection, there's some statistics for that. In terms of displaced effect, there's some academic studies in relation. So I think it's almost a question I would sit quite nicely on the fence here and say, you represent the voice of the community. I police or have responsibility for policing 11 significant urban areas the size of Tavistock. There will be a vast different view across all of those towns and conurbations in terms of civil rights versus preventative measures, volume of antisocial behaviour. So it is one where we will step into it and certainly be a conduit for seeking financial support through various commissioning bodies. There'll be a funding request that maybe you will have to decide, but in terms of representing the voice of elected members of the community and striking that balance, that we want your views collectively, and that there are forums for that.
Yeah, that's a fair answer, thank you. Also, going on CTV, a lot of our shops and businesses obviously have their own cameras within the shops, which is very, very useful. And combined with that, we combine that with the CCTV generally in the town, if we need to do that. My other question actually came down to the CPWs and the CPNs. How do you actually issue those? And once you've decided to issue those, is it delivered to their house, or do you have to call them in to issue it? Or what's the logistics on that?
So there's normally a discussion with ourselves and the police or any other relevant partner about evidence that a CPW is required, and we challenge one another about whether or not it's the right tool to use. And if it is, we found that it is most effective if we deliver it in person and we explain what it is and we explain why you've got it and we explain what the conditions are. We quite often use positive conditions as well on a CPW. So, for example, if we know someone has drug and alcohol issues, one of the conditions could be, if that's affecting the behaviour, to engage with drug and alcohol services. So that's why we find delivering in person works best. There are incidents where we do have to post it out and it arrives on their doorstep, but mainly in partnership and in person if we can.
That's brilliant. Thank you very much.
Any further questions? Councillor Kimber.
Can I just have a follow-up to that then? So that might be a positive condition, but on page 14, you're raising concerns with the commissioners on the impact of wait times to services around getting support for people for misuse of drugs. Would you mind explaining a bit more about that, please?
That was one of last year's priorities. Someone raised it as a concern. We contacted, I think it was Richard Merrifield at Devon County, around the wait times and so on, and they came back and said it wasn't having a negative impact on the wait times. So we've kind of discharged that now. It was almost a year ago, and it's not a concern for us anymore.
Councillor Guthrie.
A controversial one, I think, but only because it's everybody's controversial one. In the sort of realities of the economics of our country and many countries, how truly pressed are the police in terms of recruitment and funding?
I think that's one for me. Not unusually compared to our neighbours. So the recruiting environment across the public sector is really difficult. So I add a police lens to that. equally. So I sit in multiple forums nationally, regionally and locally. One of them with our most similar forces, which is a Ron Seal moment. They are forces that are similar to the size of Devon and Cornwall, have the similar economic output, similar numbers. When we talk about recruiting for neighbourhood uplift, which is a current government target to recruit and increase our neighbourhood constables, PCSOs and visible community presence, it's really challenging to recruit. So we recruit about 16 people show an interest to get one officer on Dan's team. That's an average, and that isn't massively different to our neighbouring partners. In terms of the funding settlement, if you do follow this, you can follow the national headlines. We are yet to receive a detailed funding settlement for 26-27. We know at headline level, you saw an announcement last Friday which removed the police uplift funding, which is the requirement for the 20,000 officers. Not causing us a significant concern, speaking plainly at the moment, because I think our headline number of officers and PCSOs will remain the same, or at least very similar. There is an onus to make more of them, which I completely support, and I'm sure you would too, putting more of them into visible neighbourhood roles. So we have invested, we've got a PCSO, Police Community Support Officer recruitment campaign. We wanted to put in an extra 43 PCSOs across Devon and Cornwall. It's been really hard to recruit, certainly to some areas. So anything you can do to support that, we would absolutely welcome. There's been some really innovative, if you follow social media, and we realise if you put something on Facebook, just checking the age in the audience here, that does exclude most people under 35, who actually we would want to be involved in that. But there's some really good social media campaigns which talk really openly and I think really inspiringly about what it feels like to be a PCSO. So it is challenging, but our funding settlement, we await with some interest, and of course it talks to other matters. So I will avoid questions on this, but it will talk to local government reorganisation. Yeah. So where our boundaries sit, it will talk to the consideration of what does some kind of governance model for policing look like. So I don't represent the Office of the Police and Crime Commissioner, nor do I represent the Commissioner. But that role will go in 2 years' time, and we don't know yet what that will fill that. So I will avoid those questions for obvious reasons. But
thanks for that. It's something, to be honest, I haven't really thought about on a sort of counselling level, but that whole idea of how, we could support that idea of getting people into employment, especially given that we're always hearing Devon and Cornwall, does have employment issues for young people. So it'd be interesting how that can be improved.
So a practical example, I'm a real person when I take my uniform off. I've been a governor. I stepped down last year, a chair of governors for 3 schools for about 11 years. I also sit in other voluntary forums as well. And when I do take this off, I actually talk to, so I go into schools. I certainly encourage my colleagues to go into schools. You will sit in your own forums well outside of this role you hold at the moment, where if you're keen and invested in the community, which of course you are because you're here today, you take those conversations into that space. And be that somebody then becomes a teacher, becomes a probation officer, becomes a prison officer, whatever it is, I think there are so many routes for young people to enjoy that career. And we see, unlike probably when Dan and I joined policing, people will do it for 5 years, 10 years, rather than 30, 35 years. So it is a different environment. We have to move with that.
Right. Councillor Greenberry-Pullen, please.
Interesting, you mentioned the social media, actually, because there's a young woman who's a PCSO, I think, South Devon, it might actually be Torbay area, but she's regularly on talking about her role and her journey as a new PCSO, and I think it's really encouraging. My own daughter looks at her and feels quite inspired. And just following the previous question, actually, and it may be a little bit unfair, so if you circumnavigate it, I appreciate potential reasons why. Is there a wish list that you as a force have in ways in which the council and elected members, and you have sort of alluded to that a little bit already, can better help you, or specific tasks that we can look at more intensely that would be really beneficial to support you in your roles?
I don't know if I would avoid it. It's a really interesting question. So understanding documents like this, you will process quite a few over the lifespan of a year's worth of council meetings. If this conversation and some of the really important matters, you look at those priorities, reducing domestic abuse, substance misuse, antisocial behaviour, they don't just sit in this room. They are the issues. So we try and reflect what our community tells us. And we're one part, 2 parts of a 5-part partnership, aren't we, as alluded to at the start. So there are other 3 statutory members and many other, including third sectors, that touch the work that we do. How you take that out to the people you represent is probably the ask back to you to inform them. So actually that does meet. Because that's where we put our funding. That's for community protection notices and warnings, where we put our time, and that can be quite a significant amount of time, just from that single case you mentioned earlier. And those single cases in small communities will have a significant impact. If you take that singular issue and put it into the middle of another area I represent, Torbay, or into Plymouth, it might get absorbed into something else. It's a sad reality of life. But taking these issues into those conversations you have with those you represent. Now, we would love, across parish councils, town councils, borough councils, district councils, etc., in that tiered state, a unified singular voice. I'm not naive enough to expect that, but actually that shows the breadth of the views that we will take into consideration, and actually we will then sit somewhere in between. So things like local government reorganisation, there isn't a unified view across the whole of Devon, Cornwall, Plymouth and Torbay. But we will react proportionally to whatever the consistent view is and the decision made. So it's the same here when you've got, if you bring issues to us, and we will, whether it's through Let's Talk, I don't know if Claire or Dan, you want to add anything to the forums that we would expect. So I'd expect one of my officers to be in a parish council at least once a year. And the same for any other body. But I'd expect the professional on that board, the clerk, to have a good relationship, be it with a neighbourhood beat manager, right the way up to a sector inspector, or with me at district and county level, to have a really thorough, engagement throughout the year of issues that come up and are discussed. So there's multiple different ways that you can get those views. That's probably my singular ask.
I'd just add that on a more local level, obviously, if you can share the information that I send out around Let's Talk, around the bite-size awareness sessions, I know we've got a police intelligence form that you can fill in if you've got issues on the ground that you know that you want Dan's team to be aware of. Dan has a very open door policy. He's not precious about his email. If you've got issues on the ground in your area, contact me, contact him, and we'll work together to do what we can. But I think communication is key.
Just because at a tactical level, it makes sense to have total participation from all partners, and creating that environment where people feel comfortable sharing information is really vital, because our perception as a single agency may be different to someone else's. So West Devon matters, the drop-in sessions, there's an opportunity there for me to get a sense of what the temperature truly is in that area for a particular topic, and those environments that we've created have done that for us, and we've been able to achieve positive outcomes.
Okay, final question from Councillor Goffey.
Yes, I was just thinking, do you still take on, I think, school leavers as police cadets? Because I know we have a young policeman in Oakhampton who started as a police cadet. I haven't noticed any around the town. Is there a sort of quota for that, or is it only particular places that have them? What's the sort of recruitment structure?
So well, probably both share this one. You could be a police cadet, I think, from 13. Yeah. So not police, they're not school leavers. So if you've got any young people who are vaguely interested, even in the public sector, there's not a pathway to being a police officer, albeit when you do your application and you want to show evidence of public service, it's normally pretty good evidence. And they do some interesting work. We've used them in test purchase operations, so purchasing alcohol, going alongside an adult to see, so this is, how to phrase this, but you go with an adult to book into a hotel to see if children are being exploited. And they've done some really significant work for Devon and Cornwall Police, right at the cutting edge of what we are looking to do as a police force to prevent exploitation of children and young people. So it's a fantastic route.
I'd also add that we've actually had input from our police cadets in terms of antisocial behaviour and what their view was on it and what they felt we could do about it as well. We've had that.
Just come back quickly. There's a jobs fair in February coming up in Oakhampton, if you've got details of that, Claire.
I don't have details, but
okay.
Right, thank you. Personal thanks for you all coming in on such a terrible day, and actually very, very informative, very informative. And I think as a committee that, the time, and we value the work you do and taking the time to come and speak to us. And I'll just do the recommendation and then we'll let you go, and then we'll have a few seats arranged. So basically the recommendation is that the committee, one, note the excellent work of the Community Safety Partnership, and two, encourage members to support the annual priority setting process to reflect the priorities in their communities. So that's encouraging you, like you have today, to engage. So thank you. Okay, and just wait for Councillor Elliott. He's going to get some water, and then we'll start, Mrs. Buckle. This is the second time in 24 hours, because very, very comprehensive project yesterday via the old teams. Thank you, Lisa. And also good member turnout. So that was very, very good, because usually Mondays and wet days and people don't tend to turn up. Right, I think we'll make a start, Mrs. Buckle. Is that okay? Because Councillor may have stepped out for a bit longer than we thought, though. So over to you, Mrs. Buckle. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Chairman. So good afternoon, members. Before you today, there's a paper on the budget proposals for the next financial year, 2026-27. On page 22, we've got the executive summary there. So what this report looks at is not only the position, the financial position for the next financial year, but for the next 2 financial years as well, 27-28 and 28-29. Members will be aware that just before Christmas we did receive the government's finance settlement. So the draft finance settlement was laid in Parliament. We have been analysing the impact of that, and we have got a section in the report that looks at that in more detail. Members will be aware that we've talked before about the government's fair funding review. In section 3 there, we do talk about the fair funding review. We've put the words fair in inverted commas because unfortunately it's been anything but fair really for Shire district councils such as ourselves, which have received the lowest amount of funding in the settlement for next year. So looking at the executive summary on page 22, these proposals would give a balanced budget for next year, 26-27. Obviously, we have a legal duty to set a balanced budget. So what that means is all of our expenditure, we have to evidence that that is financed by either income or government grant or other income streams coming into the council. Looking forward to 27-28, we can see that we've got a budget gap of £546,000, so just over £500,000. And then in 28-29, that budget gap gets even bigger, and it's £1.15 million. Now, if the current timescale for local government reorganisation happens to the timescale that we think it will, the last financial year in which the Borough Council would set a budget would be 27-28. The new unitary council would come into effect from the 1st of April 28. So although we've got the modelling there for 28-29, it is just for illustration purposes to show the impact, because probably the council will be in local government reorganisation by the time we get to 28-29. Section 2 deals with the background and assumptions. Again, so what are the assumptions that we have built into this medium-term financial strategy? Well, we do know that government have announced that the council tax increase limits for us as a district council, that will remain at the higher of £5 or 2.99%. We also know that the government are going to cease the new homes bonus scheme. That has been confirmed. And within our modelling, we have done things like make provision for the pay award as well. And in the last bullet point there, we just make the point that local government reorganisation would be such that the Borough Council would cease on 31st of March 2028, and then from 1st of April 2028, it would be the new unitary authority. So in section 3 on page 24, it shows the impact of the government's funding review. You can see there's a diagram in page 3.3. The blue bits of that diagram are the government funding that we will receive. So you can see that that is reducing from 3.696 million in 25-26. And by the time you get to 28-29, that government funding has been reduced to 3.4 million. So that's actually a reduction of 7.5% over those 3 financial years. So we do have a multi-year settlement this time, so it's the first time in a decade that the government have given us our figures really for the next 3 financial years. Normally what happens is you get 1 year at a time. So the government have committed to a multi-year settlement, so we will still get every year before Christmas, we will still get an announcement, but the figures will be very similar to the figures in this report. There won't be any significant changes, I don't think, over the course of the multi-year settlement. You can see there on page 25 the impact of the government's funding review on all of the different categories of councils. So you can see metropolitan districts have done the best really out of the settlement, with a 5.4% increase in their core spending power. That compares to Shire districts, who have got a 1.2% increase in core spending power. So, we know that inflation is going up 3 to 4% every year. So we're not even getting inflation cost pressures being funded by government. In actual fact, even with that 1.2% increase for Shire districts, what the government will have done, it will have built in an assumed increase in council tax of 2.99% within that figure already. Going forward, on page 26, there has been analysis done nationally by Rural Services Network, but also by Pixel Financial Management. And what we can see is that rural authorities have suffered the biggest losses in funding in the 3-year finance settlement. The council has responded with our consultation response to the settlement, and we have made some very pertinent points, I feel, particularly about some of the effects and why some of the funding has been taken away from rural councils. There were a couple of points there, one of which is there used to be funding for something called the remoteness factor, and what that used to do was compensate councils, rural councils, for the fact that actually it does take time to travel distances are larger, the cost of delivering services, it does cost more to deliver services in rural areas, and the remoteness factor used to give funding for that. Unfortunately, in this finance settlement, that remoteness factor has been taken away, and therefore that has removed some funding from rural councils such as ourselves. The other thing that has impacted us is the government have reduced the weighting for visitor and commuter population. So whereas in the past we used to get an element of funding for sort of seasonal population, if you like, that has also been taken away, and the weighting is now very much just on permanent residents. So that does disadvantage areas with a high concentration of tourists and commuters. On page 27, just a bit there about business rates. So you can see that our business rate baseline has been set for the next 3 financial years. So these are the figures that are unlikely to change from government. Probably the key figure in that table on 3.13 is the baseline funding level, 1.563 million for next year. So that is the minimum amount of funding from business rates that the government will guarantee that we will receive as a borough council. In terms of members will be aware, we used to be part of the Devon business rate pool. So we used to pool our business rates with all of the other 10 councils in Devon. Because the baseline has been reset and all of that accumulated growth above the baseline has been taken away by government, it doesn't make financial sense for us to pool next year. So the recommendation is that we withdraw from the pool, and the other 10 councils in Devon will all be making the same recommendation to their councils. I have to say, since that pool has been in place since 2013, the Borough Council has done really well financially out of being part of the pool. We used to get pooling gains of around about £200,000 per year. So we have made good gains by being in the pool. That's not to say we wouldn't look to whether we joined again in 27-28. It's something we will look at annually. On page 28, that sets out the figures for revenue support grants. So again, these figures are confirmed now for the next 3 financial years by government. So you can see their revenue support grant just over 2 million for next year, but it does go down to 1.789 million in 28-29. So that is the line that you can see the government funding being reduced over the next 3 financial years. In terms of section 4, we've got the budget proposals. We've got cost pressures for next year of just over 1.6 million. So that's things like the pay award. We have put 200,000 in there, which we are recommending for supporting economic development activities. So members will be aware that this is the last year of UK Shared Prosperity Funding. That's a government grant scheme. And we are using that funding for things like business support and business advice. We would like to carry on doing that in 26-27, carry on supporting our businesses. So we are recommending that we fund that 200,000 from our own base budget, rather than what's happening in the current financial year, where we're getting government grant to be able to do that. Just looking forward there in terms of savings and income generation. At next week's Hub Committee meeting, we can see there is a report on there showing the month 7 budget monitoring report. There is an underspend predicted in this financial year of around about £80,000. So that's 0.9% of the overall budget. One thing that has helped our budget for next year, and this will be the case for many Devon councils, is we've had the pension fund revaluation. That's been done by the actuaries of the Devon fund. That fund is actually over 100% funded, so it's meant we have been able to reduce our employers' primary rate pension contributions into the fund. So that's helped our budget for next year as well. We are also looking to put up Treasury Management income targets. Obviously, base rates have dropped. Base rates are now 3.75%, and we think they will drop again to 3.5% in the summer. We're also looking to increase our income from planning. back to 433,000 income target. In section 5, that just sets out what an average bill for West Devon Borough Council looks like. So you can see the West Devon element, currently £269.41. If that were to be increased by 2.99%, that would be an increase of £8.05. And a 1% increase in council tax generates £60,000 for the Borough Council. We've also calculated the second homes council tax premium. In terms of the tax base, that equates to about 435 bandy equivalent properties. So that council tax second homes premium, that would generate 1.1 million for our area. And our element of that, as the Borough Council, would be about £120,000. That's our 11% share. And we are recommending to put that into a housing earmark reserve for housing projects and initiatives. In Appendix E, we've also got, in terms of Recommendation 6, we've got a policy around discretionary exemptions to long-term empty properties and second homes premiums. Just to say, those are the same policies that we've got in place for the current financial year, so that would just be a continuation of those, that policy for 26-27. In section 6, we set out the council plan and fees and charges in section 7. And in section 8, we have got a section there on the council's unearmarked reserves and earmarked reserves. And we have obviously been monitoring that over the last 3-4 financial years. In terms of the capital programme, at next week's hub committee meeting, they will meet to discuss the capital bids. There's just over £500,000 in capital bids. Some of those feed back to the council plan as well. And in terms of next steps and proposals forward, obviously today we've got the meeting of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee to consider those draft budget proposals. And if there are any points or comments you would like to feed back to the Hub Committee meeting on the 27th of January, and then full council will meet for final approval of the budget on the 17th of February. And that's when we would have a recorded vote by members. That's when we would set the West Devon Borough Council share of the council tax. And then on the 19th of February, though that is put together with the decisions also taken by the major precepting authorities, the fire, the police and the county, also our towns and parishes. Very happy to take any questions, Chairman, on any of the content of the report. Thank you.
Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Once again, very comprehensive. Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much. As always, first-class presentation. Much obliged. 2 quick questions. One, the rural fund loss that you mentioned. What's the percentage loss against the budget, and also how much does that relate to in actual cash terms?
Yeah, so in terms of Rural Services Delivery Grant, we used to get just over £500,000 in that. So that was actually removed in this financial year. Yeah, but what we weren't expecting was the government to further take away the remoteness factor as well. Although, because the government don't publish their methodology, we can't work out how much has taking away the remoteness factor taken away from our funding.
So is the remoteness factor part of that £500,000 loss, or in addition?
I would say it's in addition to that, yes, yeah. Although some things have come back slightly in our favour. So when in 2013 there was, again, the government did a funding review. They looked at things like relative needs. At that point, we didn't get all of the funding that we were due in 2013, and some of those gains were sort of damped away. With the new funding system coming in, some of the funding that we should have got sort of 10 years ago has come back in. So there are things that we've lost, things that have come back in, but overall, we are certainly down on our funding by over £250,000 over the next 3 financial years.
Per year?
Per year, yes.
The other question, obviously, it will be more pertinent from 27-28. But the reserves that we carry as a council, when we cease to exist, what happens to that money?
So those reserves would go into the new authority. So whatever the makeup or the geography is of the predecessing authorities, those finances would just transfer, as would the balance sheets of those councils, and be amalgamated into the new authorities. So it just transfers.
Well, are we under obligation to maximise or minimise that amount?
Well, I think we're under obligation to hold a prudent level of reserves at all times. And when members consider the budget report in February, I will do a risk assessment of our levels of reserves. So every year, SIPFA, who are the Institute of Public Finance, they do some benchmarking, which they give to Section 151 officers. It's something called the Financial Resilience Index. And that I will bring that to members as part of the February report. What that actually shows is our unearmarked reserves are lower than the benchmark average at the moment. Our earmarked reserves are probably slightly higher. But obviously, we need to bear in mind that those reserves need to be held for unforeseen circumstances.
Which
things like the pandemic came along in 2020.
As reserves we are.
So we need to hold a prudent level of reserves. And if you look at our reserves, I think it's in section 8 of the report. You can see they are in terms of the net revenue budget, that percentage is going down. It used to be up at 150%. It's now down to 119%.
Generally, do reserves relate more to capital spending rather than revenue and income processes?
We do have capital reserves as well, but there's only about £500,000 in our capital reserves. So mainly those reserves are more revenue related, I would say. Having said that, if we were to have a major capital repair that we needed for one of our assets, probably the place where we would look for funding for that would be those earmarked reserves.
There is actually one issue which is almost proverbial sword of Damocles. That is the Meadow Centre and swimming pool. Myself and fellow councillors did a visit recently, end of last year, to see what the current issues are, and there are potential things that could come. At the moment, they're not in sight, but they are potentially financially very hazardous.
So at the moment, the contract that the council has for leisure repairs and maintenance is part of the obligations of the contractor. Obviously, we have officers who do things like visit the plants at the leisure centres and look at the risk assessments that have been carried out by the contractor. Yes, we are always looking at whether there are opportunities for investment as well, whether there are any grant funding streams that we can tap into. I think last financial year we were successful in getting some external grant funding. It was around about £100,000 for the Oakhampton swimming pool. We're always looking for ways that we can draw in any Sport England funding as well for the centres.
Thank you very much. Very kind of you.
Councillor Southcott.
Thank you, Chair. I noticed going through your documents before we came to the meeting, the garden waste income, that used to be £40 a few years ago. I know I was instrumental in one of the discussions of putting it up considerably to wash its face. I note now it's gone up quite a bit and you're proposing even more on that. Is there a particular reason why that is jumping up in such lumps?
I will answer that. The fact is, Councillor Southcott, is the charges from FCC have gone up considerably as well. So whilst we get the income, we still have to pay FCC to collect it, and FCC charges are rising faster than our garden waste charges at the moment. So it's inflationary, you could argue, but you would argue it's more than inflation because...
Fine, thank you.
Councillor Coffey.
Thank you. Councillor Reid and I are obviously of the same mind. My first question was, what is the appropriate level of reserve to carry us through to the unitary? And obviously your answer is prudent. So I shall take that as an answer. Right, I'm not quite sure what prudent means, but obviously it's a balance. Should all 4, districts put the same amount from their reserves into a joint pot? Because this is taxpayers' money. So we want to make sure that it is, that we're not funding something that's happening in Torbay. And my final question is, should all borrowing, because I notice the Borough Council has borrowed quite a substantial amount, to my eyes, should all borrowing be repaid before we become a unitary?
Should I take the borrowing question first? So in section 10 we set out how much borrowing we've got. So at the end of March 26 we'll have borrowing of around about 26 million. Now in terms of the interest and the principal that we repay on that borrowing, we have got funding streams that are paying for that. So, for example, we borrowed 2.5 million for when we refurbished Kilreview Park here. That was being funded by rental income that was coming in from the areas that we have let out. Similarly, we own 4 investment properties as a borough council, and the rental income we are getting from those properties is higher than the debt charges we are paying back. And other councils will be in the same position. So all of the other Devon councils, yes, they will have debt, but they will have income streams that are paying for that debt and repaying it, whether that's rental income or whether it's something that they've built into their base budget. And not only will they have debt, they will have assets that are associated with that debt, as we do. So yes, we have borrowing on our balance sheet, but also we've got assets, investment assets. So it's looking at the balance sheet in totality, not just looking at the borrowing line, but looking at the assets as well, just as we would in our own personal life. If we've got a mortgage, we've also got a house generally. So it's looking at both the whole position. When we did modelling for our submission for LGR, what we looked at is something called the relationship of gearing. So we looked at the levels of borrowing of all of the Devon councils, and we looked at what income streams have they got to repay that borrowing. And actually, when we benchmarked ourselves against other areas in the country, we were slightly lower in terms of our debt gearing. So we were in quite a good position, whatever the makeup of the new Devon unitary is. I think the concern probably around borrowing is more around something called the dedicated schools grant. So if you have upper tier functions like Devon County, they will be holding a negative balance on their balance sheet around dedicated schools grant, and there is lots of questions about how that's going to be funded in the future. There is going to be a government paper on it. For example, will they want councils to borrow further in the future to meet that? So that probably is more of a concern, I think, than the current levels of borrowing throughout the Devon councils, because I said, that is a piece of work that we did as part of modelling for local government reorganisation.
I think Mr. Molyneux has something to add.
Sorry.
Yeah, thank you, Chair. I think, Lisa, that was a really good answer to what I think was, whilst a genuine question, probably an unfair and impossible to answer question. And if it was a scenario where we're making an assumption at the moment that it's a 4, but it might not be. It could be the Devon one, and then the Devon one might bring several £100 million worth of debt. And it also makes an assumption that we can choose, and we can't choose. This will be a government decision. So I think it was a really good answer to what is an impossible question to answer, Lisa, but well done.
Thank you. And in terms of the question around reserves, again, there wouldn't be a formula that says each of the individual councils has to carry this amount of reserves into the new authority. It wouldn't work in that way. The way it would work is that, again, all councils, not only in Devon but across nationally, will be required to hold what is deemed a prudent level of reserves. That is down to each 151 officer to advise their members on what they feel is a prudent level of reserves for their authority. That's always informed by risk assessment. That risk assessment I will bring to you in February, but that will look at things like what are the risks to us as a council. So, what's our funding settlement looking like for the next 3 financial years? Well, it's not as good as we were hoping. I think that's probably, I've spoken to the other Devon Section 151 officers. I think all of the Devon authorities are thinking next year's not too bad, but 27, 28, that's when the budget gaps are hitting all of us, I think. So it's bearing in mind, are we going to need to use an element of reserves for 27, 28, and obviously 28, 29 into the future. But yes, there isn't a sort of standard formula as such, but what I would say is that every year we have our accounts audited, as will all Devon councils. If the auditors felt that our levels of reserves were too low or too high, they would make a comment around that. We had our audit report went to the Audit and Governance Committee before Christmas. They had no concerns. We were given 3 green lights in all 3 areas that we were assessed on. So the auditors don't have any concerns, and they would flag it to you if they did, as that's their role as the external auditor.
Councillor Greenbury, Pardon.
I just wanted to come back to Steve, thanks, Chair, and I just wanted to ask you how, it might be a naive question, apologies if it is, how tied in are we from a business and contractual perspective with private contractors whose prices are going up and up and up?
So we're currently in a contract with FCC until March 27. And now, obviously, in terms of that contract expires before local government reorganisation, and we have asked FCC to give us a price to extend for effectively a period of time that would take us into the new unitary authority, whatever that may be. At the same time, we're also looking at what other options there may be, and there will be a report that's going to the Waste Working Group, I think in February, with a report coming to Hub Committee on a recommendation in March, I believe.
So, as a council, within those contractual terms, were we aware of the maximum increases that private contractors could put up their costs to the council by, or was there a potential area of improvement that could have occurred within the contracts to prevent that from happening?
There is a mechanism built in for inflationary increases that's based on all sorts of different factors, from fuel prices to recyclate prices to cost of employment. The fact that the government got rid of the national, or changed the national insurance, that cost was then borne. So there's a number of factors. Difficulty in recruiting in West Devon is one of the issues that they have as well. So I wouldn't really want to carry this conversation in open session, but we are looking into it to make sure that West Devon as a council and its residents gets the best value and the best service.
Thank you.
Councillor Daniel.
Thank you, Chair. I just wanted to ask about how the government works out the settlement, because I see that they use a national deprivation index to work out what each council gets, which obviously advantageously for urban areas. So can we as a rural council make a case that rural deprivation is an ongoing issue for us, and it's very difficult to address because of rurality and more expensive? And I know it's not so concentrated as the urban areas, but it's still there and it's still something that concerns us. Thanks.
Lisa, can I take this, if that's all right? So I was on a call today with the government minister about LGR, and one of the things that they talked about was the indices of multiple deprivation, and it is crystal clear that they are focused on that, and they're not focused on rural. Rural is a small percentage of that. They are focused on inner city indices of multiple deprivation. We do have the Rural Services Network that we're a member of. And Lisa, I don't know if you want to talk, you probably know more about that than I do, in terms of a lobbying group with government. But Lisa, do you want to say anything on that?
Yes, thank you, Steve. Yes, so in 3.10 of the report on page 26, as you say, very much so, the 2025 indices of multiple deprivation have been used for the funding formula. We can absolutely see that that is favouring urban councils, as you say, much more, and alongside the loss of the Rural Service Delivery Grant, and it's compounded by the removal of the remoteness factor in the settlement as well. So we are a member of Rural Services Network. They used to be based here at Kilreview Park. So we have very good relationships with Rural Services Network. They represent all of the rural and sparsely populated councils within, not only within Devon, but nationally, and not only district councils, they represent counties and unitaries as well. So they have put forward a very comprehensive consultation response. We put a copy of that in our members' bulletin last week, but as part of that, government ministers do like to see research and stats and data. So Rural Services Network have very much made that point about, rural deprivation as well. Will there be any final changes to the finance settlement before the middle of February? I'd like to think there might be a small tweak to the settlement, but whether there will be any significant change in our funding, I think it's probably unlikely at this stage, because the government has a certain amount of money. If they change the way that is distributed and give more funding to us as rural authorities, they've got to take it away from somewhere else. So that's the difficulty in making changes at this point in the finance settlement. Having said that, about 5-6 years ago, many rural MPs did lobby the government and said they weren't going to pass the final finance settlement in Parliament. Right at the very last minute, there was a change to the finance settlement, and I think we got about an extra £200,000. So it doesn't happen very often, but it's not to say it's not impossible. There's always that chance that there may be a small change.
Have we approached our MPs as a
Yes, we do. Yeah, and they are aware of this remoteness factor having been withdrawn, as they were aware of Rural Services Delivery Grant being taken away as well.
Just to add to that, Chair, if I may, the bit that Lisa's missing there is when our MPs basically said to the government at the time, they were, of course, the MPs of the government, the ruling government party, whereas now none of our MPs are. So I don't see that it would make any difference whatsoever.
Councillor Reid.
Thank you, Chair. Lisa, you half addressed my next question, but you may have further insights. This preference towards urban rather than rural, is it based on any hard statistical evidence, or is it more of a political process?
It's politics, Graham. It's pure politics. So, I mean, I joined local government and I worked for a inner city unitary authority that was Labour run, and I joined in the year that the opposite government came into power, and all the funding was cut immediately within the first year. and that was the start of, what do we call it? I can't remember the word, I don't know why. Austerity, yes, I've tried to forget it. That's right. And then all that's happened now is we have a different government of the opposite political persuasion, which is doing the exact opposite of the previous government, and it's just politics.
I understand that, Steve. The thing that gets me is that the cynic in me says it's all politics. I would like to have seen or been able to find some sort of evidence to demonstrate a reason for the preference. I mean, Fair's parish is one of the poorest parishes in the area, relatively speaking, but it's a relative thing, of course. And whilst I'm not a borough member for that particular ward, because it's my community, I care for it as any sensible person do. And I just really find it quite depressing to think that this high-level stuff is going on anyway.
Thank you. Councillor Vachon.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Lisa. I imagine this is quite a big juggling act to get through this, and then we've added LGR into the mix. I'm just going back to external borrowing. Suddenly had a thought there. Obviously, the external borrowing, if we amalgamate all that into this new authority, and they're all taking all this in from their individual borrowings, obviously the interest rates are all different as well, depending on when they borrowed it, who they borrowed it from, etc., etc. So it's going to be an even bigger sort of balancing act once the new authority comes in to service all these loans with all these different interest rates. There would be no way of actually amalgamating those before that actually happens.
Yes, that's right. In terms of most of those loans, I suspect are similar to our loans in that many of our loans are 50-year annuity loans, so they don't mature for another 40 years into the future. Many councils, I think, in Devon have got long-term borrowing, the same as us. Some councils will have short-term borrowing. So what will happen is when that debt is amalgamated into the new unitaries, along with the assets that is associated with that borrowing and the income streams, what will happen is there will be a treasury management team that will look at those borrowings, and as we do now as a council, they will look for any opportunities for early repayment of debt, whether that is financially beneficial. They will look at whether there is any opportunities for debt restructuring. So that is something that the new unitary, when they are responsible for larger treasury management portfolios, that they will look at opportunities if there are any debt restructuring opportunities or anything that they can do that's financially beneficial to the new unitary. Just to say, we have got treasury management training coming up in, just to check that's in members' diaries as well. MUFG, who are our treasury management advisors, they always go through things like, are there any opportunities for debt restructuring for us as the Borough Council? And again, they would look at that as larger unitaries. Yeah, but you would certainly have, in larger unitaries, there would be more than one person doing treasury management. And even with the one person, that they've got other things that they do as part of their role as well. So, yes. Obviously, at Devon County, they've got the Devon Pension Fund as well. So they've got investments there as well that they look after.
Okay, I'll take two more questions. First from Councillor Guthrie and then Councillor Goffey.
It's not a question, it's just a quick statement to remind members that Rural Services Network is really worth at least looking at their monthly newsletter, because it covers every single thing that you have to face as a councillor. And today, I think it's today, is the last chance that you can complete their survey, which does ask about your opinions on their priorities for the year going forward, because they are an excellent lobbying group for everything rural. So if you've got, it's about a 10-minute survey maximum, it's worth doing for every member. Thanks. That's the RSN survey.
Councillor Goffey.
Sorry. I was just going to remind Mr. Molyneux that there are 72 Liberal Democrat MPs in the House, and most of them are from rural areas. So we do stand a chance.
Very optimistic, Councillor Duffy.
Right, okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Mrs. Buckle. Thank you for all your questions. As Mrs. Buckle said, there will be a chance to talk about it at full council, and it's coming to Hub next week, so there's plenty of time. I'm just aware of the time, so thank you, Mrs. Buckle, and I will read through the recommendations. So the recommendations are: 1, that the views of the Overview and Scrutiny Committee are sought on the content of the draft budget proposals for 2026-2027. Views are sought in particular on 1, an increase in council tax for 26-27 of 2.99%. This would increase a band D for Delta, council tax for 26-27 from £269.41 to £277.46. An increase of £8.05 per year or 15 pence per week, as set out in 5.5 of this report. 2, the financial pressures shown in Appendix A of £1,652,000. 3, the savings/additional income of £557,500 as shown in Appendix A, and 4, the net contributions to and from earmarked reserves of £755,850 are shown in Appendix D, including proposed use of £70,000 from the business rates retention earmarked reserve to fund the 2026-27 revenue budget. And finally, 5, transferring £120,850 from the Second Homes Council tax premium for 2026-27 into a housing initiatives earmarked reserve to further the council's housing priority. I hope you all got that, because I'm not reading out again. Sorry, I thought I got away with that. Sorry, 6, just scroll down, dear oh dear. 6, adopting the discretionary exceptions to council tax, long-term empty and second homes premiums as set out in Appendix E. 7, that the council should set its total net expenditure for 2026-27 as shown in Appendix B as £9,892,995. 8, the earmarked reserve should continue to have a minimum operating level of 1.25 million as set out in the medium-term financial strategy in October 2025. Have you had enough? That's it. Thank you. Thank you very much, Mrs. Buckle.
Are we voting?
You need to vote?
Well, yeah, you need to.
The recommendations, right.
Yes.
You're just seeking our views.
I was seeking your views, but I'm...
So on the top there.
The recommendations.
Right, I'll Mr. Molyneux is far more wise than I am. So can we have a show of hands that they accept the recommendations, please? Thank you very much, members. Thank you, Mr. Molyneux. Buckle, and we'll shortly move on to the thematic update of the community wellbeing.
Do you want me to?
It would be very good to hear from you, Councillor.
Yeah, perfect. I wasn't sure if people were moving seats before I was going to launch into an introduction or not. That's fine. I will launch into an introduction. So you already know that I'm the lead member for community wellbeing because we've already talked about the community safety partnership. The sort of headline here, if you look at the traffic lights, is that things are going pretty well because we've got 5 activities completed out of 18 activities. And we've got 13 activities on track within the budget, which is the green category, and we've got nothing in amber or red. So at that sort of very headline level, it's all looking good. There's a helpful summary on page 60 of your papers, and there's 6 bullet points there that give the highlights and then a more detailed table underneath. So I thought I would just highlight 3 of those bullet points and invite some sort of comments and reflections. But now that all the moving of chairs has happened, just to point out that Susanna is the sort of key heavy lifter for community and well-being, with Neil supporting her as her manager. That's what managers should do, is they should support their staff. So they will answer all the difficult questions, but they're also here very much to listen to people's comments and suggestions, because it is always helpful to have different members' input to something that affects us all, because we're all here because we're interested in our community. So one thing to say about this portfolio is it's a very interesting one, but as I've said before, it's also a very tricky one because it's quite sprawling. It touches every element of the things that the council do. So we've also got Ian Luscombe here and Jenny Hotchkiss, who I also have regular meetings with, because it's all intertwined really in terms of community well-being. So the three things that I particularly wanted to highlight from these bullet points on page 60 was firstly the Junior Life Skills programme. So just to give a little bit of background to the Junior Life Skills programme, this is something that's been going on for many years, delivered by West Devon. And it's basically for children who are in their last year of primary school, before they go up to secondary school, to get some literal life skills about things like safety, electrical safety, life-saving, all the sort of, road awareness, all those very practical things that you want people, the young people, to know about before they move up into the next stage of education. And it's Ian's team, and Karen in particular, who's led on this. There was a little bit of grumpiness, I think it would be said, in 2024, that things didn't go quite as smoothly as had been hoped, and that was partly due to the sort of venues that we'd got. So last year in 2025, I have to keep reminding myself what year we're in, so sorry if I'm sounding pedantic about this, but so September 25 was when it was run, the scheme, and this time it was done jointly with Fusion, which helped in terms of the locations and venues. And it was also good in terms of the number of different partners that were there to provide very interactive sessions with the children. But the real challenge at the moment, well, maybe there are two challenges. One is that the schools are finding it more and more difficult to organise affordable transport to actually bring children into Oakhampton and Tavistock, the two places where it's run. And so you'll see from the more detailed table that there's actually been quite a significant reduction in the number of children who took part, because it was 400 children in 24 and it went down to 300 children from 17 schools in 25. So that's one challenge, and one thing might be for members to be more involved and for schools to get more support in terms of transport costs. But the other challenge that we've got, and this is where it's sort of interesting to have members' thoughts about this, is that in the future, as we've just been talking about, West Devon won't exist anymore. So as a sort of coordinating body, we won't be there to offer junior life skills. So I feel it's our responsibility to think a bit about a succession plan, and whether it, what the appropriate level is to offer this. So just, to think about that and how it might be maintained going forward, and how much members think it is a really valuable thing that we do, because certainly there's a lot of officer time that goes into contacting schools and making it all work. So that's one thing to think about. I also wanted to draw your attention to the two new grant schemes that we were able to launch. And Susanna was really central to this and pulled together very good documentation and also good panels to judge the different proposals that got sent in. It was really quite difficult because we got a lot of people who were interested in this funding. But it's also down to Lisa Buckle's team that we actually have the money that we're able to then channel out to our communities. So they were launched last summer with a deadline of the end of August, and that process all went through. So people may well have seen, hopefully have seen, that there's the second round of the Arts and Activities Fund that will be, the closing date is Sunday the 1st of March. So it's still, there's enough time for local community groups to apply for funding, and hopefully people can learn from feedback from last time. But this is a real way of West Devon leaving a legacy and making sure that the money goes out into our communities where it's most needed. So it's important to be aware of that, and sort of linked to that is a reminder that we've all got our sustainable localities budgets, and that those were put up from £500 to £1,000 a year. And I know I'm feeling a bit guilty because I haven't spent nearly all of mine this year. And for people who just want £100 here, £200 there, it's really important that we don't just sit on that money, that we get it out to our communities. So that's the second thing to highlight. And that links in with the arts and culture plan, which is the third thing that I want to highlight. And I know that Councillor Vachon and Councillor Kimber are already sort of pretty up to speed with this because they came to a meeting about the first part of this piece of work. So we really learnt from East Devon, who had commissioned a set of consultants who are real specialists in arts and culture to do some desk work, to do some consultation work and mapping of what arts and culture is available across the district or across our borough, in order to then see where there are gaps, what the strengths and weaknesses are. They completed that before Christmas, and we've seen the report on that. That's very much a sort of inward-facing report. And then the second part of this work, which we're just launching at the moment, is where they actually write a strategy for us that, to be honest, is more of a plan than a strategy, because it's got to be some very actionable things that we can do in the short term and maybe the medium term, given that we're talking about a limited lifespan of this borough council. So that's really interesting work. And just to sort of highlight a couple of the headlines from what they were finding about arts and culture across West Devon. So one was that we've got a really vibrant offer, and particularly in terms of festivals and music, you know, small scale festivals in places like Hatherley, lots of sort of folk music as well across the borough. But what we haven't got is very much inward investment. We haven't got investment from outside. We haven't got many sort of large arts council grants coming in. And things are a bit fragile in that they're dependent on a group of dedicated volunteers who, certainly in the case of Chagford, are not getting any younger. And there needs to be a real thought about how we make sure that our arts and culture offer is much more resilient. So those are some of the themes that will be explored in the sort of second part of that piece of work. And even with the possibility of us applying for some funding as West Devon from the Arts Council to bring in some funding. And already that work has given us a sort of closer link to Arts Council England. So I haven't gone through the minutiae because I'm hoping you've all read the papers. And as I say, we've got Neil and Susanna to answer any difficult questions. But have I missed anything vital, either of you, that you think I should have said? You're allowed to say yes.
I think the only other one to highlight, Councillor Elliott, is that we've also been talking to our key partners over the last few months.
Yes.
Key partners such as Citizens Advice, the CVS, and a couple of community transport schemes, and they've come along and presented to Councillor Elliott, Susanna and myself what they're currently up to and the challenges that they are seeing within their sector. So I think that's the only other one to highlight. Really positive conversations with those community partners, and let's face it, they'll probably be there after West Devon Borough Council is. So we're looking at how we continue to support those, and our suggestion is that we continue to support them for a couple of years to get us through to the point of LGR. So I think that's a sensible suggestion and a good thing to do. So that's the only one I'd add, Jane.
Thanks very much, Neil.
You all happy to take questions? Councillor Reid.
Thank you very much, Chair. Yes, this the individual pots we hold, what's the deadline for spending in the current period? Is it up to the end of March?
It would be the end of March, yes. I mean, your balance will roll forward to the end of the following financial year. But yes, I mean, to be honest, you probably need to any request in this financial year. You probably need to get in by the end of the first week in March, I'd say, so that we can get them through the accounts. It's not to say you can stop, because you can certainly award funding. It just means the physical payment won't go out until April.
The second question is that an organisation who is aware that I could make a grant said they had put an application in, and they said it had been closed. They couldn't put an application in. Does that make any sense? This is a local sports club, by the way.
Have they had a grant this year?
That must be
They've had no funding from the council, to my knowledge.
Right, okay. That would probably be the Arts and Activities Grant, which Councillor Elliott alluded to, which is now open for applications. So we can certainly, and we included it in the member bulletin last week, but we can certainly recirculate the link to that application process.
The details, so I can then go back to the organisation concerned. They're very much focused. They're very much focused on supporting young cadets for both sailing and rowing. So it's a very worthwhile project, and I'd be happy to give a modest amount to it.
Councillor Goffey, please.
Oh, I'm on. Well, it was just a comment, really. I was very excited to see that Junior Life Skills Programme is still running, because I was a volunteer with the Red Cross section of that 25 years ago. So that's how long it's been going. I was trying to work back. No, it's an excellent programme. I was just wondering, rather than having a single focus place, I mean, it used to be up at the army camp when I was doing it, because I did it for several years, whether it would be feasible to do it in sort of like cluster groups in village halls, so that the schools haven't got such a big transport thing. But of course that means then you're running it more than one day. So it's a cost implication.
Catching the eye of
I'm here.
Luscombe.
Yes.
I want to answer that.
Jan, I was probably there as well, I hate to say. I don't think you did first aid on me, though, but I might be wrong. So I think we need...
That was the body, actually.
I think we need to keep all options under consideration. At the moment, we've gone away from doing the one venue at the army camp to 3 separate venues, so that does give a lot more local approach. But I wouldn't discount the option of actually going out into the communities, into the schools. But I think where we have done that on one occasion before, it's quite a big task to move all that information and people to that location and then move it to somewhere on a different day. But I would say nothing's out of the question. I am very passionate in terms of my support for Junior Life Skills. I can really see the benefits of it. The number of people who say to you, oh, I was at Junior Life Skills when I was X age and now I'm doing this, is amazing, really. And I think it's a real highlight of one of the things that we do as a council, and I'd certainly hope to support that in terms of whatever happens next. I do know that I think we are the only South Hams and West Devon are the only 2 councils left doing Junior Life Skills in Devon, I believe. Because the others closed their programmes when there was no funding, but we kept ours going. Thank you. Chair.
Councillor Vachon, please.
Thank you, Chair. Yes, like Jan, I was involved 25 years ago at the army camp as well. I think a lot of us were in those days. It's good to see that it's kept going. I think it's absolutely brilliant, and it'd be a shame to see it go. And when we do actually merge in authority, I don't know if any other authorities actually do life skills, but it'd be nice to have that back and retain that. That was my first question. Also, it is supported by lots of other charities and groups around the area, which is interesting. And they also give grants out as well, a lot of these charities, like Oakhampton United Charities and the Rotary, to actually get those kids to various functions in the town. So there's no reason why we couldn't actually partnership with local charities to help bus in the children to this event. And I think it's worth talking to them. I know we do it within Rotary, that we have the Adventure 7 scheme, which we do exactly the same thing. We give grants to the children to enable them to come to do events similar to that. So it would be a shame to lose it. I think we'll try as hard as we can to keep it going. Thank you, Chair.
Okay, a lot of interest in keeping the junior life skills. When I was with Plymouth City Council, I got involved with junior life skills as well, running the dog warden service, so it does do a useful community thing. Any further questions? Councillor Greenby-Pullen.
When you mentioned earlier about the reduction or lack of uptake on some of the grants that are available, particularly maybe with the Arts Council, is that correct, first of all?
So the point is not a lack of uptake, it's that very few bodies within West Devon have got the sort of capacity to bid for large grants. So Wren Music, for example, based in Oakhampton, is one of the sort of lone groups that has actually managed to bring in Arts Council funding. And so that's where, in terms of a strategy that goes on well beyond us, is how we empower groups to be better at applying for funding. And in a way, that's what was the thinking behind our Arts and Activities Fund, that if you can get people to sort of practice by applying to us for £500 to £3,000, and if they then are successful, then they can put on their grant application, we got funding from West Devon, and then they've got a sort of track record and can then apply for bigger amounts of money. But that's the challenge.
So that leads on to my main question, which was actually what's the viability, if I draw a parallel, I know Devon County, what's the viability of putting an advisory hub together to help smaller organisations that, I know whether it's a charity or whatever type of community group it is, they're often busy with their own lives away from the work they do. And I know when I've run an NGO before, people say there's so much granting out there, and you think, well, who's going to spend the next 6 weeks putting that grant application together? Well, Devon County Council has Quids for Kids, which runs out of Citizens Advice. So although that's slightly different, with a focus on looking at funding for families who could access that perhaps don't have the support otherwise, they offer that support. So to put a hub together with some advisors who could then outreach and almost do the work or ghostwrite with these groups would be so supportive, and I would definitely support that, if that's viable.
So that's a brilliant point, and these are exactly the sorts of things that we're hoping that other consultants will start to develop, and that we can then carry that conversation on and see what is practical for us to do. Great, thank you.
Councillor Kimber.
Sorry, I forgot. This is a question about disabled facilities grants. So on this sheet, it says key risks and issues are demand is greater than the budget available, and there's a shortage of suitable builders, but the status is green, so I assume we're within budget and we are finding suitable builders.
Very good question. I appreciate that you've really read the papers. I'm going to turn to Ian again, Ian Luscombe, because it's his team that is at the sharp end of this. So he's probably the best placed.
Thank you. So in summary, with regards to disabled facilities grants in West Devon, at the beginning of the year, we were allocated £748,000 as a grant from Devon County. That comes through the Better Care Fund. Up till beginning of January, we had approved £384,000, which leaves around £364,000 left to approve. That kind of indicates we're a bit behind, but it's not uncommon for this time of year to have to put additional resource in to make sure that we approve the full amount of allocation, and I'm confident by the end of the year we'll be able to have done that. Any unspent grant would, however, roll over into the next financial year anyway, so there was a risk. It's quite the I won't call it the market, but I think the situation's changed a little bit in that we had a great deal of demand last financial year, and if anything, we're running the risk of overspending. This financial year, we've seen a change in that amount of demand, which has gone down. We've also reintroduced some means testing to try and counter some of that risk of overspending the budget. But what's happened is actually we've gone into the risk now of underspending the budget, so we've had to remove some of that means testing. So it's quite a a dynamic area in terms of demand and in terms of us getting the resource right in terms of approving as much as we can by the end of the year. But we've now put additional resource in. I'm confident the team are working hard and we're hoping to approve as much as we can before the end of the financial year.
Can I just follow up on that?
Yes,
So do we have enough builders to do the work?
It's difficult. We do have a group of good builders who are very loyal to us, and we work really hard with the relationship with the builders. One of the key things is to make sure when they invoice us that we pay that really quickly, because if we pay up, they come back. If we don't, if we're slow in paying, then their heads get turned to do other jobs. So I think we do have enough builders out there. However, because of the nature of some of the works that we do, they are quite complex, so it does take a time sometimes between actually approving a grant and then getting the bricks in the ground or whatever it is put in place. So there can be a bit of a period of wait for the client where the builder becomes available and then a wait while the works are carried out. Thank you.
Councillor Reid. I've gone to Councillor Daniel then.
Perhaps you got us mixed up.
No, you're far prettier than I am.
Thanks. So my question really is about care experience support that we're offering, and I think it's really great that we got the council tax reduction of 100% and also leisure centre access. And just wondering, are there any plans for this coming year as to increase the support we can offer to care experience young people who we know really struggle to find their footing in life quite often? Thanks.
Thanks very much. So I'll answer this briefly and then see if Mrs. Hotchkiss wants to add anything. So the thing that I'm most aware of is that we also have a household support fund, which has been trickled down, as it were. Lots of money is given to Devon County Council, and then they pass all that out to the different district and borough councils. And through that scheme, we've been able to make a grant to care experienced young people. So that's been a very direct financial support rather than something in kind like the Fusion Leisure Centre. So that has been ongoing and really quite generous. And we've sort of got in the order of 20 individuals that, obviously it fluctuates and it's up to the age of 25. But just to give you a sense, we're not talking about 300 people across West Devon. We're talking about, a couple of dozen. Mrs. Hotchkiss, do you want to add anything to that?
Thank you, Councillor Elliott. No, there probably really isn't anything to add. The Household Support Fund is going to come to an end on the 31st of March 2026. It's going to be replaced with another scheme, a Crisis and Resilience Fund. We have just received some guidance and we'll have a look at that and just work up any options to see if we can actually continue to provide support to care experienced young people.
We make sure that they are aware of any benefits or grants that might be able to help them. This fund.
Yes, when we first received the information that they are a care leaver, as part of that assessment, we do actually look at sort of other measures that we could provide in terms of wider support to them.
Councillor Greenby-Pullen.
Can I just confirm that when we as a council use the term care leaver, we're referring to young people who have hit the age of 18 and have come out of foster care or a cared for facility, as opposed to people who have been in care but then been adopted at a later stage. Now, the importance of my question is because I can speak as an adoptive parent, not specifically about my children, of course, but my broader knowledge on children who have been through the care programs system and lack of support very often. Because someone's adopted doesn't necessarily equate to the fact that they don't have the relevant support that they need throughout life, because the challenges that they find themselves in are typically experienced at a very young age and continue regardless whether they're adopted or not. And I think that's always been, to my mind and understanding, a little bit of a block with regards to young people across the country, actually, who are perceived to be care leavers, but exclude the people who have all been in care, whether they have been adopted or not, because all adopted children have been in care and often carry the same trauma and challenge as those who come out at 18 from foster care or residential care.
Councillor Ellis.
Yes, so if I can respond to that briefly, because I'm aware that there are other meetings people need to go to. So I think it's a really interesting point and something that can be discussed outside of this meeting in more detail. But just to sort of set out the framework here, we are acting as corporate parents. That's the way that it's seen. So if somebody is leaving the care system at age 18 because they've been in a care facility or with foster parents, then you can't expect them to be, those parents to be giving the same level of support. So that's the sort of spirit that we're having these policies, you know, these different sorts of support from West Devon is in our role as corporate parents, which is probably why it seems less appropriate when someone has been adopted and does then actually, as I understand it, and you're much more experienced than me, have a legal parent. So, but let's not get into the debate now because I'm aware that I have limited understanding and it's a personal issue, but I don't think it's appropriate for this meeting. With apologies, Chair, for doing your chairing for you.
That's fine, thank you.
Yeah, very briefly, and I really appreciate your response, and I understand the complexity and the challenges that may present around legality. What I would just summarise by saying is it's actually about the young person, and the focus should be driven by the young person's need. And if they have had that experience, they've had that experience because of pretty harsh experiences earlier in their life. So it's actually looking at and supporting fellow councillors, looking at ways of how that may be possible to expand and be supportive across the broader community.
Final question from Councillor Kimber, please.
It was going to be a double question, but it can just be yes or no answers. Formation of a community development team. It says facilitate support for communities to develop community resilience plans. I haven't heard any of my parish councils talking about that. Is that a surprise? And my second question is on raising the profile of the council. You can just ignore this one. It just says we're going to focus on high footfall and targeted engagements. So does that mean we're ignoring all the smaller settlements? Thank you.
Councillor Elliott.
Yeah, so I think Susanna's probably better placed to answer this, but it's also about when that second part is very much about when we're going to things like the Oakhampton show and we have stalls in various places, including Tavistock and Chagford. And so it's thinking about being more strategic about those and making sure that we've got really good materials and topics to engage people with. But the sort of local resilience plans, Susanna might want to say something.
So, so we're working, so Luke in our team is working very much with Ian behind us, but also with Devon Communities Together. So Devon Communities Together are contracted by Devon County Council, if you like, for emergency planning and community emergency plans. And they have grant schemes to support parish councils to update or create a community emergency plan. And so Luke is arranging cluster meetings with Devon Communities Together where we invite parishes to come along and they can understand what their obligations are and how they can get support in order to either update or create plans. So that's in the way in which that we're working, if that answers your question.
Very quickly.
Yes.
So would you expect our parish councils to know anything about it yet?
Yes, I think there's one coming in a couple of months and they will all get invitations. Every parish council gets an invitation.
I can say they're working in Buckland Monacorum because I look after two halls and Devon Communities Together, and particularly Wendy's been to see us about community resilience and all sorts. So they are, but that's in this part of the world, so they are. We've got quite another couple of things on the agenda, so I'm conscious of time, and I don't want us to be the longest running meeting. So we'll just quickly say thank you, Councillor Elliott, and her team, and they're very comprehensive. What I did take on board was there's a lot of enthusiasm from members to help, whether it be junior life skills, regarding care leavers. What I will say is there are other forums for people to take part. Don't just wait for the committee meetings. I mean, we all know each other. We all see each other out having a coffee and that. You know, this is the way it's going to work. Come with solutions. So I just say that, you know, just don't wait for the overview and scrutiny. Don't wait for audit and governance. It can happen. So I've just got to have a short recommendation, which I hopefully won't mess up. So this one is recommendations that the Overview and Scrutiny Committee, 1, note the progress update against the community wellbeing section of the council plan. So can I say that's noted? Thank you. Right, the next item on the agenda is the Task and Finish Group update, and I know Councillor Vachon wanted to give a brief update on the Fusion Task and Finish Group Working Party.
Chair, can you excuse me? I've got to do SLT meeting in Lisa,
right.
If that's okay.
That's absolutely fine.
Yes. In
Thank you. Thank you.
Sorry.
Right, Councillor Vachon.
Thank you. Yes. We actually, at the last meeting, we asked a few questions regarding the leisure facility at Parkinson Meadowlands. John Parkinson gave a very comprehensive email back to all the members of the Task and Finish group, answering all those questions and giving us a few more details. He is still looking to organise a trip to both facilities in the near future, and we will discuss that near the time. But he actually gave, we did ask for a facility audit, which he's given us for both Meadowlands and Parklands. That's quite comprehensive. So if you haven't received that, let me know and I'll forward that on. And also we asked about facilities in other leisure facilities around the country, and also the referral schemes that they use. And he's given a few examples from other authority leisure centres of how they actually go through referrals. So it's something we can learn and discuss at the next meeting. The other thing was decarbonisation. Unfortunately, the government has pulled the public sector decarbonisation scheme, so there's no further grant funding on that. So we can't take that any further forward unless we find alternatives. So that's all I've got to say for now. Watch this space. We'll get a trip organised sometime in the next few weeks to the two facilities. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Vachon. Not really an update on the South West Working Party, only to say that there is a Teams meeting tomorrow at 5 o'clock, which is the South West Water local briefing session, which was sent to all members. So if you haven't got that, I think you can ask Kathy, she can send you the link, but it's tomorrow at 5 o'clock. Next item on the agenda is the work programme. So this is the last item. So get the work programme up. So basically, the next meeting is the 24th of February, and we're going to have a report on climate and biodiversity from Adam Williams, Drew Powell, and Councillor Christopher West. Thematic update, economy and jobs, which will be Chris Shears and Councillor Neil Jory. Then any task and finish updates, if any. And then, again, we'll look at the work plan. Obviously, today's been quite a packed agenda, so I think we'll probably leave it at that. As people want things to come to the overview and scrutiny, if you need to bring it to my attention or to Kathy's attention, then we can bring it up. There are South West Water, the Environment Agency, Citizen Advice Bureau, sort of future thoughts. But if anyone's got any organisation they'd like us to sort of speak to, then please let me have the details. Councillor Reid.
Thank you. Yes, a quick question. This may not be the right place. I've had a message just come in this afternoon from one of the local activist groups, Transition Tavistock, concerned about the removal of waste collection bins. Is that something that should be addressed by whom?
I think that would be the waste working group.
I've also heard it's applying down at Weir Quay or down in Bear Ferrers, Bear Elston, I mean.
I will speak from experience that the removal of a lot of bins is not just...
These are big recycling.
Yeah, right.
I think, sorry, Chair, I think these might be the glass recycling banks, is that correct?
Yeah.
I certainly know that on the town and parish meeting last night, Mr Mulleneux picked up an action to look into it and come back to you. So, I mean, if we could park that one for now, but it would certainly be, I think it would be within the remit of the Waste Working Group.
The ones in Tavistock and in Beer Elson, which is down the bottom of Pilgrim Drive, it's an excellent occasion because it's the one major parking place in the village where people can drop their stuff off.
I think what we'll do, we'll leave it to Steve Molyneux, who's obviously on the case, as Neil has said, and then...
I would like it recorded that we should resist this removal process as far as possible. Recycling is absolutely vital.
Okay.
Can I just point out that glass recycling is done through your domestic collection, and the cost of retrieving these huge skips must be considerable, and if everybody recycles at home, there really should be no need for that expense, which is what I presume this is about.
I think, rather than getting into recycling debate, we will wait till we have an answer from Steve Molyneux, but I accept that the recycling is a very hot topic. So on that matter, it's just before 4:10, and it's, sorry, Councillor Daniel. I'm just going to close the meeting while it's still light, because I don't want to be a chair of a meeting that goes on into the dark. But thank you all for your attendance and lively debate and format. Thank you.
Thank you, Alistair.
Kathy, could I have that? Kathy, could I have the link for the meeting tomorrow afternoon, please?